inside the devil's den. Trapped inside the devil's den.
So there is a common theme that I'm noticing while I'm going through a lot of these AuthorTube books to be able to do these videos for you guys, and it's taken me back to when I had been reading a lot of more self-published and indie books. I know that it was kind of hot for a time to just be self-published for the sake of being self-published, and a lot of people were willing to support that even if the writing was terrible. This was at a period when I was reading everything. It didn't really matter if it was traditionally published, it didn't matter if it was self-published. Anything that Amazon would recommend me, anything that I saw online, I just had to have it because I was so starved for literature. But I also noticed that self-published novels and self-published writers were getting a lot of flack, not really being that acceptable, and for you always hear about the grammar and the punctuation and the format of the writing itself and the structure of how it's worded, and you don't really hear a lot about the story. Hello, my name is Nicole, and if you're new here, I am the creator of the Unwanted Book Club channel here on YouTube. Today, I wanted to talk about the difference between, writing a book with story and writing one that is not. Because if it doesn't have a story, it's just a book full of scenes and random things that happen for no reason. Obviously, when we're writing anything, we want to be able to answer the most basic questions that we know we're going to receive from our peers, from our friends, our coworkers, anyone that we open up to. And that question is usually, well, what are you writing? This is usually followed up by, well, I write romance, or I write thrillers, mystery, suspense, romance, novels, the works. Then when you tell them that you're writing a book, specifically a book, usually they'll ask what the book is about, and that is usually followed up with what you would consider the synopsis or the blurb that goes on the back of your book to convince someone that they're going to want to read it. Usually this is more about the story and more about what is going on in the pages of your book and what kind of story are you telling. It gives them more of an idea of what they're going to be waiting for and kind of what you're writing about, what they might have to look forward to. But your book and your story are kind of like two separate elements. Might belong to a genre where certain things happen to appeal to a certain type of audience, and it's kind of just put in anywhere where people know where to go when they want to look for a specific thing. Usually about the scenes and the world that it's set in and the type of characters, maybe. But your story is going to be something much deeper. It's going to be what you are trying to relay to your audience, a journey that your character is going to go down, and what exactly happens and what changes actually come about. Now there is one author-tuber in particular, and I'm not going to say who because that would be breaking the most recent rule that I had set for myself, but it is coming. This particular author-tuber's book I had read a couple of years ago, and I liked it at the time. I think I was really more so impressed because of the writing style in it. There's a lot of prose, like a lot of purple prose especially, and she's a beginner obviously because my essay is, going to be about debut authors and mostly about their debut books and their debut writing and how they started out, how they came about giving advice, etc., etc. But that flowery writing was what I really enjoy reading at the time, and I remember that I was getting a lot of reviews popping up for this particular author complaining about the story. And I just remember thinking, it wasn't that bad. It was a really good book.
You're in denial, Latrell.
But something was missing. Going through it again with what I know now, I have figured it out. It doesn't have a plot. It doesn't have a story at all. The characters are just doing what they do, and what they do is nothing. And nothing happens. It's not even like, well, what kind of message are you trying to tell your reader? What kind of changes come about for this character? How they begin on one end at the beginning of your book and then come out on the other side. Because if they're the same from beginning to end, then you did it wrong.
I think we did a pretty good job so far.
This particular book has a lot of scenes and it has a lot of mostly random things happen, but it's also a lot of drama. It's also a lot of monologue, and it's a lot of things that come about that have no sense in really being there, but they could have had a purpose, and that's really what was missing. The plot of your story is essentially it's going to be the backbone of your story. It's going to be what drives your characters to do things to come out changed on the other side. Now, I would say that there was somewhat of a story, but I think that story kind of wrapped up at the end of Act 1. And then it's like we're kind of thrown on this weird roller coaster of just random events happening, but there's no point for those events happening. The characters don't really change. They don't really have a goal in mind. And if they have a goal, it's for like a blip of a second that they're trying to do something. And then 5 pages down, they're contradicting the whole point to even having that goal to begin with. This got me thinking, because I did used to read more self-published novels, and I don't think I have a lot of them now. I think I did like unload a lot, but when I was reading them, I do remember that I came across this problem very, very often. Usually the characters would have like a goal, but there's no real plot. There's no real reason to have that goal, and there's nothing that really comes about as a result of the story. So you're just left wondering, like, what did I read? So it really kind of felt like just a book of monologuing, and it kind of felt like a book of scenes and maybe enough of a story to scrape up to throw on the back blurb of the cover. It does, but the back would make it sound like it has a story, but again, that story ends, it literally ends in Act 1. Like Act 2 and 3, we're just wandering. We're not really doing anything at all. But this kind of caught me off guard, because if I remember right, she's a planner and a plotter. And this is something that, from my personal experience, I've come across with people who are pantsers that don't go through their drafts as often as they should to try to connect the dots like they should so that the story comes together. Kind of opens up the idea that a lot of the plotters and the planners on here are good at giving newbie advice, because that's the only thing they're really experienced with, and they don't know how to take it that extra step to teach their audience what there is next to learn about. And there is a lot, but we're kind of left with a lot of the same, because nobody really has any kind of experience, any kind of learning. They're not really learning anything, in my personal opinion. They don't really have any qualifications aside from marketing or from advertising or graphic design, and it's just like, well, where do you go from here? Like, you have a lot of different avenues you could take. You have a lot of different authors and writers and a lot of different fields of literature to take that experience from, to be able to learn about, but you're basically putting the same story on repeat, one after another, after another, after another. And then again, this person, much like some of the others that I have mentioned, saying that they're condemning the haters and they're just going to write what they want to write. Nobody is saying you can't write what you want to write. Nobody is saying that you can't write that type of story. But the ironic part is, a lot of times, because I also read one of her, I'm going to give it away. One of her tips was similar to like keep with the trends, if I recall. To keep with the trends with what is selling. Or she at least sided with somebody who said, keep with the trends that are selling. Tightrope act whenever you hear one of these author tubers that are like, you should write what you want to write. That's why I started. I quit the corporate world and screw the haters. And then on the flip side, they're like, well, you got to write what people want to read. It's not all just about, well, I want my atmosphere to be in like ancient Rome and ancient Greece, and people want romance, so I have to give them romance, damn it. It goes a lot deeper than that. And there's a lot in literature that I'm noticing is missing that people might want, but they don't know that they want because they never learned what they're actually looking for. Makes any sense? Things that I didn't know I was looking for until I started going around wandering on the YouTube spaces and finding different people talking about different things that taught me about different things that I didn't know about. And then it was like, oh, I found it. So I was also going through some of Kate Kavanaugh's videos where she talks about her vlogs and she talks about her writing routines and her writing style and everything. And she's working on Project Death. I think that's the project that she's working on currently. But she always talks about the scenes. And maybe it's just because she's trying to spare her audience, although I have seen her open up a little bit more lately. But I always hear her talk about this scene goes here, this scene goes here, I'm working on this, 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 and this. And it's like, you can only go so far to explain the scenes, because you're just going to have a book of scenes if you don't really have a story that's going to pull those scenes together. This is kind of why I am against like writers hopping all over the manuscript, because they just want to get these scenes in here, because then you have this mental obligation to yourself to make sure that you don't lose those scenes. It's difficult rewriting your first rough drafts because you have so many things that you already feel attached to and you're just trying to hold on. If you're writing a book and it's scene here, scene here, scene here, scene here, and they're really good scenes that you really enjoyed writing and you think you wrote really, really well, but you don't have anything in the middle to be able to connect it or give it a purpose in the story, it's going to be very difficult, like emotionally, mentally, to convince yourself that you need to take out those scenes. I would personally recommend writing it in chronological order. I know that that's the natural way, and it doesn't have to be that way. If you're good at just writing the scenes first because you can flush out your book, then go for it. But I do think it's something that not a lot of people talk about is writing is not all fun. It can't be all fun. And if you have a scene that you're looking forward to writing, maybe write it on the side, but at the same time, like, I don't know. It's different for everyone because I do know that there are certain scenes that I'll be looking forward to, and then I'll get to those scenes and I'll put it off for like 3 weeks. But at the same time, it also kind of like, if I have the scene in my head already, it kind of helps me brainstorm a little bit first. And then sometimes that kind of helps me create these other scenarios and connect these certain dots in the plot before I've even written it to be able to know how I'm going to get there. If that makes any sense. Because you can write a scene in a certain setting, in a certain role, and think you know how it goes. Then if you don't give yourself enough time to kind of digest it, you're not really going to make those tiny little tweaks that make the scene mean something completely different than how you originally thought it was going to come off. Now, another misconception I kind of wanted to talk about is the editor and the editing, because this is a very, very meaty subject for me to get into, especially with all of my unpopular opinions. But one of the common misconceptions I have on here is I think that a lot of writers have this idea that the editor is supposed to fix their book, and they're not fixed. Like, you, just because they're supposed to fix certain things in your book doesn't mean you want to send them in a fixer-upper. They already have enough on their plate. You don't want to send in a really, really crappy draft, pay so much money only for that editor to just struggle to find anything that they can put together, only to throw up their hands later and be like, I don't get paid enough for this. And that's another thing I'm kind of wondering is, with all of the author tubers on here and all of the reading essentially the same, which is like really crappy drafts from like someone in the 8th or the 9th grade, are they paying the editors enough to actually dive into the structure? Because a lot of these books have structural editors, or the author tubers will say that they had developmental or structural editors, and I'm just not buying it. They're not getting like the higher paid ones who are, again, just kind of giving them a once over, calling it good. They're only paying so much because from what I've read, you could pay anywhere from $2 to $10 grand for these developmental and structural editors, which I think is a monstrous amount. Are they only paying so much and then they're only getting so much in return because it is an expensive process, especially for self-publishing? And I will dive into this subject. I have words upon words, but I'm kind of putting it off because, again, I have very unpopular opinions about this process and I need to learn more about it before I come on here and give all of that. But as far as the editing goes, especially the structural and the developmental editors that they're claiming are going through their stories, I'm really not convinced when your story doesn't have a structure at all. Like, there's nothing to hold on to, there's nothing to gravitate towards. From my understanding, I think like the traditional publishers, they either have like really, really good editors. Their editors are very thorough at fleshing out anything that they're going to sell because their brand is going to represent a company. Also, you have a lot of freelancers out there. You have a lot of freelance editors that are
bombastic side eye.
You know, what does it mean to be freelance? It means you're free to be whatever you want to be. Good and bad news, like on one hand, you don't have the gatekeeping of, well, you have to jump through all of these hoops and you have to go through all of these qualifications to get to, you know, do what you want, you know, similar with writing. But on the other hand, you also don't really know what you're going to get. Even when you're getting someone that someone else recommended, you've kind of got the love goggles on. You don't know your book from Adam, and it's going to be a mess if you're handing it into a complete stranger who admittedly is not going to care about your book as much as you do. But I think that conversation is something to be had anyways. I don't really think that a lot of writers should need like a developmental or a structural editor unless it's like a newer author. I feel like these are things that we can train ourselves to look for in stories. Editors that work with developmental and structural, from what I have been told, they're the ones that look for like the plot holes and the character arcs and It's possible I'm getting that one mixed with, proofreaders, and they are, doing different things, but from what I've been told, that's usually what it sounds like. As far as, let me be more specific, as far as the plot holes, as far as the character arcs, as far as these things that make up a story, I think that is something that writers do need to learn about and do need to learn to recognize in their own works. And how you recognize it in your own works is by recognizing it and learning to recognize it in other works. Not because you're criticizing another author, not because you're saying, well, I can write better than this. I would have seen that coming. Because that's usually how it starts, admittedly. Like you go from here and then, you think that you're hot shit, and then you go back to your stuff and you realize all of the things that you were missing. And you're like, wow, okay. But it's that humility that you kind of learn from and you kind of learn to recognize and you kind of go from there. And then it gets to the fun part after beating yourself over the head so many times. You start recognizing what you want to put into your story to give it that weight. It's a strange process, and it's not an easy process, and especially from the writers that want to give advice and want to write a lot of books about giving advice as well, and you hear a lot of the pat on the back, like, you wrote a book. And I would like to put on here another controversial opinion. As time consuming as it is, with there being so much to learn, I think it's important to encourage like the ones that are early on, but then it comes to a point where you need to start questioning if what you're doing really is enough for you, for your writing, for the success of your career. Don't think that the success of our books and of our stories is really as far-fetched as they want to make it appear. I personally think that they're focusing on the wrong avenues. You don't know what they're really doing, and they're recognizing after they've published it that it's not as easy as they were told it is, and as they're continuing to tell other people. And they're focusing so much on the logistics and on the technical side of it. Hire an editor, hire an editor, hire an editor. You need to format, you need to work on grammar and punctuation. You need to get a really, really good cover. A lot of us still want to sell it. We still want to profit off of it. We still want to be able to bring people back for more. And I think that's really where the focus needs to start coming from. It needs to stop being all of this, well, you need to advertise on 50 different avenues to get as many people and garner as much attention as possible and spend so much on editing and advertising. And I think that they're losing sight that at the end of the day, those people are still people. They're not numbers on a screen. They're not dollar signs that you're going to get in your bank account. And I do believe the way to limit that disappointment that you get when you do first publish your self-published book, when people don't like it or when they decide that they don't want to purchase the next one, is to start focusing on the reasons why. You need to start asking yourself, why are people going to want to come back to me? I see this on Twitter a lot too, where you have so many people just shouting into the void, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. The writer retweets, let's support writers. And I don't think you realize how many writers are out there. And it's just, it's gotten to the point where it's ridiculous. I think that everyone, honestly, should write at some point in their lives. It's an eye-opening moment. You learn so much about yourself. You learn about what you want to do. And a lot of stories come from like the most niche places that we never would have imagined people might be into. But writers need to start asking themselves, why are people going to want to read my book? But if you want to make a difference, and if you really want to make a stand, you really want to stand out, and you want to be recognized as a writer in your own right for what you're writing, that's what you need to start considering. What are you writing for? Why are people going to want to come back? Not just why are people going to want to read my book? Why are they going to want to buy my book? Did I yell at them enough times for them to spend their cold, hard cash? Or are they going to be coming back for more because they actually enjoyed the stuff that I shared? I think that really should be like the main focus right now, honestly, because I think writers are kind of setting themselves up for disappointment with all of this networking and advertising and focusing on the logistics side of it. It is a very strange world we live in where it's like everyone has to be famous, everyone has to be an influencer to be seen, and I think it's sad. I think there's more to life than that. There's more to writing than that. And I think it's just, we can focus on a lot of other things to find success instead of feeling the need to become a sellout. The truth of the matter is most people are writers. Whether you know it or not, whether they're writing on Wattpad or they dabbled in it a little bit in middle school or they're writing like a lifelong project for 40 years and they're taking their time with it. most people have written at some point in their lives, and it is a great gift. It is a great art, and it is a great learning experience. The difference is, being a writer and telling a story is learning to tell that story, is learning to recognize what you are sharing with your audience. There is a lot of hope left for writers, even when you feel like no one notices you and no one sees you. There's a lot to explore, but you are focusing too much on this and what's going on outside of here. And you need to go in here and you need to dig deep and dig your heels in and put in the work and the writing. It will come out. You have to have faith. You have to believe in that, because you could go through years and years and years and years torturing yourself over the same damn book for 11 years. Still sits on a shelf because you don't know what it's about.
I'm tired of this, Grandpa.
That's too damn bad!
I think it really distracts from the point of why we're here, and it kind of takes away from our story and our journey because we're so focused on that end goal that is usually superficial. We all want to make it. We all want to be recognized. We all want to be successful, or, you have the hobbyists that enjoy doing what they do, but they don't know why. And then they don't know how to explore that because all we're getting is sell your book. My rant for today. So I hope you enjoyed my video. Hit the thumbs up if you did, and I hope to see you guys in my next video.
The demons you forgot about, in the blind spot sitting in the bed. Now I'm making up beat, invisible to me, yeah. Corrupted souls don't know, got black mold behind the drywall. Couldn't even see, even when you bleed. So now you can feel